Hey, hey, how's everybody doing? You know, I hope everybody's making the best that they can out of this whole pandemic situation. And in times like these, everybody just has to kind of come together and hope this blows over, hopefully sooner than later. But for someone like me, there's been a question burning in the back of my mind for the longest time. Ever since I was a child in my early anime endeavors, I've always thought to myself and said, is the Bible the best manga ever made? Well, surely it is the most popular by numbers, seeing as how so many people praise it to the point where there's a cult surrounding it. And it also has sold the most copies than any other manga ever made. It also had some very lackluster anime adaptations, some spin offs here and there, Bible Man, this and that. But the most shocking point of them all is the live action adaptation. It's been classed as one of the highest grossing movies of all time, which is surprising seeing as how all live action adaptations of manga, or anime for that fact, have been totally utter garbage. In the beginning, life was merely a concept, until it wasn't. God, the main character, creates the Garden of Eden and two filler characters, Adam and Eve. Their purpose is to make life flourish on Earth. Satan encourages Adam and Eve to sin by eating from the fruit of the Garden of Eden. This is a very stupid rule, seeing as how they'd have to eat eventually, making this one of the first plot holes in the manga. But I digress. After this act of sin, God banishes Adam and Eve to the Shadow Realm and is ashamed of his creation. But before they go, they have three children: Jonathan, Joestar, Seth, Cain, and Abel. Seth isn't important at all to the story. He's just another filler character because the creator of the manga didn't really like even numbers. Through the power of asexual reproduction, those three turn to hundreds. Many years go by, and during these years, lots of corruption and evil fills the world. Because of this, God decides to activate the Halo Ring, wiping out all of life on Earth, except for the first doomsday prepper, Noah. Noah single-handedly crafts a death-proof boat and fills it with a lot of animals and his family. They all survive the Halo Ring and keep life going. After all that commotion, Job shows up, but let's just skip this part of the arc because a lot of people disregard it. 10 generations after Noah, Abraham shows up. Abraham and his wife are promised land and God's blessing, everything a white man from the south already has. Abraham and his wife Sarah are old as shit, but Abraham finds some blue pills and says, fuck it, let's take this bad boy for a spin. Unfortunately, they have a son. This son's name is Isaac, and Isaac luckily finds a wife on Christian Mingle. They have two children, Jacob, and I don't know how to say his name, so I'm not gonna attempt saying it. Jacob is a player though, and he likes a girl named Rachel, but for some reason marries her sister, Leah. But then says, I have a better idea. Why not marry both of them, thus creating the first polygamous relationship? God sees how much of a baller he is and has his name legally changed to Israel. Yes, that is real. Israel then has a shitload of kids. These children later become the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph, Israel's son, who must be the youngest, I'm assuming, because Israel only plays catch with him and gives him all the attention he needs, making all the other children angry. So in order to get rid of Joseph, they decide to sell him to slave traders in Egypt. Some time passes and Israel finds out what they've done. So he decides to move the whole family to Egypt so Joseph won't feel so lonely. And also because there's a large famine going on. This concludes the Genesis saga. Please take a moment of rest if it is needed, or re-watch to take in all the information. Part 2, the Exodus saga. The Israelites start to rapidly reproduce, skyrocketing in numbers. That's when the great pharaoh of Egypt sees this amazing feat and takes advantage of the situation. He turns them all into slaves. This advances the economy and industrialization of Egypt by 100 years. That's when Moses, the server admin, shows up and puts the kibosh on their shenanigans. How does he do this? by crashing their stock market. Luckily, the Israelites survive. After destroying their server, the Israelites bail on Egypt and hop across to the next server across the Red Sea. Once they reach the new server, the admin welcomes them with open arms. He reads them the rules, the 10 Commandments. After reading these rules, they immediately start griefing the server. The admin gets mad and reports them to God, so God temporarily bans them to the desert for 40 years. Moses dies during these 40 years, and Joshua gets promoted to clan leader. Joshua then leads the Israelites to a new server. In this new server, they create Israel. The people of Israel start to get upset because they don't have a king, and every other cool kid on the playground also has a king. They plead to their father if they could also get a king for their birthday. God sighs and says yes, but nothing too expensive, so he promotes Saul to king. They live in prosperity till Goliath, the schoolyard bully, shows up and starts bullying everybody and stealing everybody's lunch money. That's when David, the underdog, decides to put an end to Goliath and slays him. This is the only time in the story where killing someone wasn't just justified, but it was also rewarded. This was also one of the best fighting scenes in any anime of its time. Seeing as how David had the biggest balls out of everybody, he gets promoted to king. All David really did as king was write some books, and so did his son, so after killing Goliath, they were kind of useless. Later on, this old fart Solomon decides to die out of nowhere. It's never really explained, he just does. But his death is so impactful, it splits the kingdom into two, the south side and the north side. This is said to be what inspires the Bloods and Crips of today. Meanwhile, Babylon decides to take over everything, and they decide to deport all the Jews. I think they're the Israelites. They just changed their name again, but that doesn't really matter. They deport all the Jews to Babylon. This is never really explained, or I didn't do enough research as to why. But then Persia decided to take over Babylon, but the Persians were cool and let the Jews go back home. Elsewhere, there was a Florida man. He takes to the streets and warns everybody of God's imminent arrival. Hundreds of years later, the Roman Empire rules from coast to coast. And at this point, Jesus is born. The Florida man gets the right to say, "I told you so," to everybody. This concludes the Old Testament, and everything after Jesus' birth is the New Testament. I won't be going over that in this video because I think it's gone on long enough, and also because I'm tired of speaking. If you guys want to, I'll leave it for another day. All in all, the writing for the Bible is mostly filler and boring character arcs that lead to nowhere most of the time. If I had to say, the Bible is one of the most overrated mangas ever. Bye.